Hi, my name's Howard Lim. I'm the president of How Creative, and I want to congratulate Moons for the 10th year for iCAN. And so it's my honor to actually be the presenter and co-chair. And we're going to be talking about how to actually create an alignment between your business model, your brand, the marketing and sales, so you have an opportunity to create something from a vision into reality. Okay, so let's begin. Connecting innovators to success. So innovation is only really one, let's say 1/10 of what it takes to build a business. The other 9/10 is really how you actually create a path for success. So, a little bit of background about who I am. I've been building brands and businesses for nearly 40 years, and for Fortune 100 companies to entrepreneurs to inventors. And we've been utilizing our SIM system, which is a proprietary process of how to create successful businesses in the shortest period of time. So again, what I'm going to be talking about is the integration between the business modeling, the branding, the marketing, and sales. And that's pretty much how our SIM system started and why it actually is so successful is because you look at the four pillars, and these four pillars, what I found are the most important pillars to building a business and a brand. So we got to start off with your business model. And really your business model is really the way I look at it is your blueprint to turning a profit. The idea again is about 1/10 of the formula. The other 9/10 is how you execute. And a big part of execution is starting off with a very clear plan. With the clear plan of a business model, some of these core ingredients are, do you have a clear core value proposition? In other words, are you clear on what problem you are solving that brings tremendous value to your target market? Okay, so you have to understand who your target market is, and you also have to look at, is your idea scalable? Can it scale? Okay. And then you really need to look at from the standpoint of your business model, what is it going to cost you to actually build your business? And then what is the revenue that you could anticipate? So when you really want to think about building a business from a idea, you have to look at your innovation locally first and then look at how it could scale globally. And you think about it, that's how Apple did it. They started off locally, and then once they got things more or less wired, you could say, and worked out the kinks, then they actually moved and migrate globally. Otherwise, what would be the problem is that if you don't work locally first and you go directly to global, you're going to compound your problems and issues, and that can get very expensive, and your burn rate will surpass what you take in from investors. This is really important that you look at things from a micro view to a macro view. Okay. So you want to map out what I call like a one sheet business plan, you could say, is you mapping out what, again, your value proposition, what problem are you solving with your invention, who's your target market as far as the customer, what do you anticipate as far as revenues from the channels of your distribution. This is how you start to organize what is the potential of your idea. And when you write up this one pager, what happens is that then you could actually then, quote unquote, show investors, okay? And there's different types of investors. The first round investors are usually what's called bridge money, where you want to look at how can you get some bridge money to bring it to the second phase. Bridge money is like what could basically work as far as your overhead for the first to 3 years. And then you look at what could be investors that want to invest and take more of an equity position. Usually your first round investors, by the way, are those who are friendly, are family and friends that actually believe in your idea. Okay. So you really, it's all about once you figure out like what more or less your business model of how you plan to make a profit, how you plan to reach your target market, what channels do you plan to use, and then what's your burn rate, meaning your overhead in what's going to cost as far as investors from the standpoint, what's their return. Now we could look at the positioning of your brand. And the position is how can you be instantly recognized in a relevant market. So brand positioning defined is not just a logo. People get confused, think a brand's a logo. That's about 1/10 of the formula. It's really how can you create the best perception in the consumer's mind about your idea that actually will create what's called brand equity. So why choose your product or service over all the rest that are out there? You really have to think about what is truly making your product unique from all others. Kind of thinking about like Apple, how the iPhone came about. It was more than just a phone. It was actually a computer and is a computer. So it allows you to do more than just make phone calls, allows you to have a computer in your pocket. How cool is that? And so that's really what took off is that it had multiple functions and it really changed and was innovative in redefining what a phone should be. So the iPhone, quote unquote, took a whole new category and built it off of how basically they're going to be unique from all other phones. Now you look at all these other phones like Samsung and so forth and so on, they're all copying the format. They all copy the format of the iPhone. So you want to look at how powerful your brand is. And these three areas that I talk about are how recognizable is it going to be for instant recall? Okay. So can people define it and say, oh, I know that product because it's unique. It does X, Y, and Z. Is it relevant in today's industry? That's why a lot of investors, by the way, invest in apps and so forth and so on, because that's super relevant because apps are very quite used quite a bit because of course the iPhone and so forth and so on. The point being is that is it relevant and does it actually fulfill a need for your customers or your let's say stakeholders in general? Okay. Does it fulfill a need? And does it resonate with them? Okay. Does it emotionally stick? Does it wow people? So when you're talking about looking at a brand, you have to think of the product designing itself. A lot of people, inventors, have these products, but they're not sexy enough. Okay. They don't really wow people because they look like maybe a brick rather than looking like it's really refined. It could be a museum piece. Okay. So you have to look at not just the functionality of your product, but you have to also look at the aesthetics. And is aesthetics actually going to be something that actually wows people? So if you look at, for example, other companies have made it very successful, are positioned that are unique from others. Like Nike was the first one to position themselves from a standpoint when it came to like athletic footwear, where they said we're going to be innovative with their ideas. And they actually came about with their waffles soles, where it gave more traction and gave the competitive edge against other runners. And that's really what gave rise to Nike was the product how it was designed the sole and how it actually was actually more functional and allowed that athlete to have the edge. And then if you look at Disney, what was unique about Disney, Walt Disney, is that he created this big giant adult playground, not just for children, but also for adults as well, where it was a safe environment and it was a whole world people would enter in. Nothing existed at a time where it was called amusement park. Okay. He literally created a new category. So when you're inventing, okay, you have to look at how that invention can actually shape someone's lifestyle. You can't just think about your product as a product. Excuse me, you can't just think about your invention as a product. You have to think it as a brand of actually how it impacts people emotionally and how it actually gives that individual an extension of their lifestyle that actually makes their life and fulfills certain needs they would not have otherwise. Okay, so when I talk about an only statement, that's the same as a value proposition. Again, what problem are you solving and how are you doing it uniquely? And how is this relevant to your target market? You have to constantly be thinking about your target market and how this actually, again, fulfills the needs that they wouldn't have otherwise without your product. Okay. You think about all these products that have been groundbreaking, like the automobile, for example. Okay, that's groundbreaking. Even as simple as a pencil was groundbreaking as a utility that allowed people to write. If you look at all the products that are out there, you got to think more than just maybe a simple feature. You have to think about the benefit. What benefits is that individual going to have that makes your product unique from all others? So when we're talking about what really matters is alignment, is market creating interest. What I mean by that is your product, again, you start with the business model, and then once you figure out your business model, then you look at what kind of brand do you want to wrap around that. Think of a brand like a person. It has something to say, it looks a particular way, and it's unique from all others like a personality. Think of it that way. You have to create this identity that's separate than you, and you have to look at it that it can take on its own life. Then after that, it's about broadcasting that brand through channels. That's marketing. Marketing and branding are totally different. People get confused. Branding is a long term, is the overall positioning for long term of what's going to make you unique from others. And then the marketing is about promoting that through the different channels that are available for that quote unquote invention. Okay. If there's not an alignment between the brand and the marketing and then sales, it's going to be a complete waste of money, unfortunately. Okay. So you have a misalignment, and that becomes a waste of money and time if that's the case. If there's no alignment between the business, the branding, the marketing, and sales. You have to think about how these four pillars are going to align. Okay. So you can, for this to matter and for the to be most accurate of how you're going to get your product out there and be most successful reaching your target market, you have to look at how you're going to map the journey for your customer from the standpoint of are they identifying your product at a retail store? How did they identify your product at a retail store? Is that going to be through advertising, marketing, social media, through campaign, promotion? And then from the standpoint, if they go to the store, where's it going to be exactly placed? At the end of an aisle? Is it going to be at a foot level, eye level? Is it going to be at the end cap? All of these things make a huge difference when it comes to actually selling your product, is understanding, again, what's going to be the journey of your quote unquote customer. And if you don't, I don't expect you to have all the answers. You need to hire experts. If it's not your genius, it's not your job. Your job is to have your vision be clear enough that you can see your vision as your idea, your invention come to life. And then hiring the right team member is super critical. Okay. The other part when it comes to the customer journey is the feedback loop. If your product gets sold in particular stores, then you actually want to have it where, let's say in the packaging itself, there's an opportunity that people could scan in a QR code and actually respond if they enjoyed a product or not. And you want to give something back to them for their participation in their time. That way you can improve upon a product ongoingly to be that much further ahead from the competition when people start picking up on your idea, even though it might be patented. All it takes is a few tweaks to change that patent. So you want to make sure that you always include the customer as far as this feedback, so you keep evolving your idea. So again, we want to unify strategy and have your product be a market leader. So the first one is understanding silos. What are causes a slow adoption to the market is you have a great invention but poor positioning. In other words, you're not clear how your product positions uniquely from others. Okay, you're not clear on how it actually is a better value for the price. Um, Strong marketing, weak business model. Here's another problem. You might have really strong marketing where you know what channels do you want to reach your target market through social media, let's say through advertising, let's say radio, let's even say the website, but you have a weak business model, meaning that your business model has been thought out far enough as far as its revenue and all the opportunities to bring in revenue. So it's unsustainable growth. Unfortunately, you'll burn through your cash and you will not be able to be sustainable for, let's say, 1 to 3 years. Unfortunately, over 90% of companies they stall out, or they collapse within the first 3 years because they haven't thought about these things. Okay. This is why you cannot work in a silo between the business, the brand, the marketing, and sales. It will lead to these issues. So the power of integration is, again, when you create alignment between the business model, the brand, the marketing, okay, from the brand, and then sales for marketing, okay? I'm going to give you an example of a company that started from scratch that we took on as a client with our SIM system. Our SIM system is strategy first, implementation, and then management, SIM. But the first part of it, the strategy, is usually takes about 1 to 3, even 4 days. We did a 4-day strategy session by looking at the 4 pillars. The business model, has it been worked out enough? The brand, what's to make it unique from all others and emotionally appeal to the target market? Understanding the channels of how we're going to market and reach our target, and then sales, how we're to convert a prospect into a buyer. So let me go over this. Okay. So here's a success story where he had a complete startup. All they had was an idea, and I show you how we look at the 4 areas. And again, we combine and create alignment between the business model, the brand, marketing, and sales. And he created licensing within 18 months with Fisher Price. Okay. Okay. So visual framework, again, going through a strategy session. Again, I don't expect you to answer all these questions, but the point being is that there are DNA parts to brand. Like, what's your vision? Right now, are you clear on your vision? Are you clear on your brand promise, what you're promising your customers? Are you clear on your quote unquote message, your core message of what makes you unique from all others? Are you clear on the personality you want to create with your product? And how is it going to be adaptable to your target market? So again, business model, branding, marketing, and sales equals strong leadership in the marketplace. Okay. The other thing that I always highly recommend as well when a company is starting to move rapidly into the market is to always do quarterly strategy check-ins to make sure if you're on track with your blueprint of where you want to head with your idea and how much of it has been accomplished with KPIs and how much has not been accomplished with KPIs. So then therefore you can make the adjustments. So Piano Winner's profile is that it teaches kids how to play the piano within minutes. And I'm talking about 5-year-olds that through a video game, a visual video game, and a keyboard, they're able to play the piano within 5 minutes. How cool is that? It's a visual learning tool, and the idea is a 4-step learning method from playing a video game to actually playing the piano. Okay. The challenge was that the client had no business model, no strategic planning, no product. He just had an idea. No real investors, no customers, no experienced team, which I helped formulate, and no practical rollout from the customer journey. Okay. In this case, we're not even talking about just the customer journey. We're talking about the inventor's journey. The inventor's journey from an idea to an actual tangible product. So again, what we do is proprietary, but we start off with usually a 3-day master blueprint. And the whole idea about why we do these blueprints is to shave off what would take decades to figure out in 3 days. What would take decades to figure out as far as like the business model, the brand, the DNA to the brand, where we're going to market, who we're selling to, it's all done in 3 days. So the first part is figuring out the business model, okay, which I call the business strategy. The second part is what kind of brand can you wrap around that strategy? And the third part is the customer journey, which is a combination between marketing and sales, okay? Again, a lot of critical thinking. We're not creating logos. We're not creating the product design. We're not creating a website. It's all critical thinking that becomes the blueprint and DNA for the implementation. But to always start off with a strategy, which is all about critical thinking first. So in this case, just to give you a highlight, is that he had a lot of ideas, a lot of different products. The first one is Piano Wizard. By the way, we came up with the names. So we came up with Music Wizard as being a parent company, and then we had all these other instruments and other academies that would fall under Music Wizard. And you have to think about an architecture of your idea. It's kind of like, with Coca-Cola, you have Coca-Cola, but then they got Coca-Cola, Diet Coca-Cola, and then they got Cherry Coca-Cola, and they got Coke Zero, and the list goes on. But the overall brand name is Coca-Cola. It's the same thing here. The overall brand name is the wizard part, okay? Music Wizard. And we're able to get to, which is really important, is to get the domain names as well, okay? Best if you get domain names as a .com. .net is very acceptable as well. And I say the third one, if you can't get .net, .com, then I would get .co if you're playing an international game. Okay. And of course, your quote unquote region, your country region is good too, like .us, for example. Okay. Or .ai for Australia. And the list goes on. Anyways, here you see here we want to roll out with Piano Wizard, and then we had Wizard Tunes, Guitar Wizard. This again is an architecture of how we plan to map out our different products, and therefore we had an idea how we're going to roll things out into the future. When you plan this far in the future, that means that people will have a very difficult time catching up to you. If you look at Apple, that's exactly what Apple did. They're so far ahead that the next company, the competitors can't keep up with them because they already thought way into the future. This all, again, is looking at the business model and looking at how we're going to adapt with new quote unquote users and enter in new spaces with your overall product. Okay. Here's the Music Wizard, and what we kept consistently as well, it is shapes around because we have to do with colored keys. And so the idea is ellipticals became very recognizable, okay, as their brand. Here you see the actual screens that we created for them. So we created a whole game interface. We created everything for them, from the website, from the naming, from the brand marks, what people call logos, through the GUI interface, the game, the package design, the promotion pieces, the advertising, the radio, the list goes on. Everything we created for them. The idea is that when these objects float up, and all the child has to do is hit the color key on their color keyboard to actually make a sound from it. So there's a strike zone between a yellow and a green. And so as this object is coming up, they hit it, and pretty soon they're playing music. And the great thing about this idea is you could slow down the pace. So if you're a 5-year-old, you're going to go slower than, let's say, a 21-year-old. Okay. The idea is that literally a 5-year could start playing Beethoven. Okay. So you start to visualize music first, and then pretty soon you're able to play the piano. Okay. And that's what the game does, is there's 4 phases to this. So we created these themes that were all original that we actually had copywritten as part of Piano Wizard's worlds. Okay. And here are some what we call the game objects and some of the game objects we created for them. And again, this is highly identifiable to build what's called brand assets for the company. Here's an actual photo shoot that we did for the packaging, where you can see here this teenager is playing the piano with her color coded, and in this case, playing Rick Wakeman music. Okay, and the idea is that the object transform it in the hit zone, and you're playing music again. Here's the packaging, what the packaging that we created for them look like. So it's easy to identify on a shelf. And the big giveaway is the Piano Wizard and the color keys that we made it strong and unique. And we got into a lot of major retail stores from the packaging because they realized that this product was unique from all others, and it was done, of course, professionally. So they accepted it. The buyers accepted it on the store shelves, okay, besides being sold online. This is actually when we did deals with Fisher Price. We actually did license agreements. And this happened very rapidly because you want to look professional at the very get-go. Raise the money to hire experts. So therefore, you have the best opportunity to compete out there, okay, in the real world. And so they actually made some great deals with Fisher Price. Um, and they also won a bunch of awards. This is all part of the strategy, by the way. When we were in a strategy session, we realized that to get a lot of exposure with this invention is to get written up and publicate in public into trade publications and also be on the news. So we're on CBS, NBC, and Wire Magazine. All this happened within a couple of years. It was all done by first having a plan, okay, and looking at the business model, looking at what kind of brand we want to create that looks world class and as a leader. And then again, what market do we dominate first, second, and third? And then how ourselves are going to convert. Okay. All done through strategically within just a few years rather than taking decades to figure out. So the measurable results, they were able to raise several funds, okay, from money to come in from different stages to do our rollout. Quick PR exposure, placement in major retail stores. The evaluation of the companies was in the millions of dollars when they had an evaluation done from an attorney. Multiple license deals, and then we reach, of course, multiple channels. Okay. Again, this is just an idea that we did it from scratch, but I'm just showing you the principles that we use, that we created, are these four pillars. The business model, what kind of brand are we going to create that's world class, how we're going to market it, and then but how we're going to convert a prospect into sales. Okay. So what you need to do is unlock your invention potential. Okay. So you have a gift that you need to bring to the world, or you are bringing to the world. The question is that do you have a solid business plan? Do you have a powerful brand? Do you have market and sales thought out? Okay. And unified to tell one story, your story. It's really important that you do this because this is where you start to realize the potential. Unfortunately, most companies don't get past first base because they're not thinking about these other components that are absolutely necessary for success. Okay. So it's been my pleasure presenting to you and being co-chair for iCAN. Here's my information down here. You can scan that in, QR code, and then here's my direct information. The best way to get a hold of me if you have questions is to email me at howard@howcreative.com. And again, I wish you all much success and I congratulate iCAN on its 10th year. So thank you so much and good luck for all inventors here and thank you for attending iCAN.